So in this part 4, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and show you how to create a CSS file, how to create a JavaScript file, because the thing that we're learning, right, is the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So if we go to images, right? So we've given it some structure. We're going to learn much more about the structure. I'm just going to show you how at least to connect these other two, because we're going to come back and learn some more HTML next week. But I at least want to show you how these files are all connected. Okay, so before we do that, now you already have had 5 of these. Let's do an HR here. Okay, HR is a line. Maybe some of you used that already, and actually I could have just done, I don't know why I did just do HR itself just to give us a line in there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is come over here. I'm going to create a new file in this directory. I'm going to go ahead and hit new file. I'm going to call it style.css. Okay, so there's my new file. It's called style. Now there's other names you could see this as, main CSS, but the .css kind of tells you what it is, cascading style sheets. You'll learn what this cascade means as we move forward. We'll give you examples of it. But again, it's a way we give style to our HTML. Okay? So we have to connect these two files to where the index can read whatever, and this is a term you'll hear, rule sets we write that we want to apply to our index.html. So up in the head section, we would type link and tab. And so link is a self-closing. It's not an opening and closing. There's only one, right? So it's an opening without a closing tag. Its relationship is by default a style sheet. There are other ways to use link, but this is the most common. And the reference here, kind of like what we did when we did images, notice there's a ref here. But in this case, we're going to reference this file. Okay, so we could type style.css. Okay, so what this is doing again is it's going to, when this page loads, it's going to load in whatever's in the CSS file to then apply it to our documents. Now we're going to learn many different ways. As a matter of fact, I often kind of make the joke, HTML probably takes, not that long to learn, because there's really just learning what each tag, not each tag even, because you only learn kind of the majority of ones. But then with CSS, there's so much to learn. There definitely takes more time, and there's more involvement in writing CSS, which kind of makes sense, because think about all the style things that we do, right? All the ways we make a page look are really important, and it's also the way we make pages responsive. So and that's just, there's many more things that CSS does for us, but because it does so much, it actually, when you're learning HTML and CSS, I often joke, HTML is a little circle, CSS a big circle. Okay, but let's just do some simple CSS. So now over at and by the way, one thing you can do here is you can actually do this by splitting the view, and then having, I kind of like to have my CSS file over here. I have my index file here. And now why would I want to do that? I'd want to do that so that I could look like where I'm going to, let's say I want to style my H1 in a particular way. Now again, we're going to learn many different ways to write CSS. We're going to write simply today, and we're going to do H1, open curly braces, close curly braces. Just basically says, hey, look for the H1 in the document. Okay, make the font. Okay, remember how we were saying that font is deprecated in HTML? That's because notice all the different ways in CSS we can handle the font. So let's say font family, okay, and look at all the built-in ways, and there's other ways to using Google Fonts and other ways to do it. But let's just for now use sans here. Okay, if we click here. And by the way, the reason there's multiples listed is that it actually has fallbacks, so that if it can't find, or in this case it's variations, and then these are fallbacks. It says if it can't find this one, then look for this one, Verdana, and then all the way to just a basic sans serif. Okay. So now that we've done that, now we're going to test to see if our CSS is indeed working. And you can already tell right here. And now how can you tell? It's kind of a little hard to tell, but I can tell just by looking at the fonts. But I could also right click, hit inspect, okay? And then here I could come over here and I could see, oh yeah, that H1 through that CSS file, here's the font family that is applied to it. And the other cool thing is I could actually take it off and say, oh, you know what? Don't actually use that rule set right now. Now, this didn't change anything about my documents, okay, about my HTML, but inside of here I can turn things on and off. And I can also, here, right, I could also say color. So I say color. And now there's so many different ways to write color. We won't even get into them, but let's just say blue for now. Because you can also, besides the many different numbering systems that we can use, RGB, hex, I mean, there's just a lot you'll learn. And then, and did I say semicolon? I meant to say on this one a semicolon at the end. So when you do that then, right, so then it, again, you can see in the rendered document here, and you can see over here what it does. Again, you can turn it off and turn it on, right? Now, again, there's so much more to learn here, but more than anything, I just wanted to show you, because I think learning HTML on its own kind of doesn't make sense, because so much of what you're going to do is like write HTML and then write some CSS. And then when you're writing code, which you will do if you're taking my JavaScript class, then you will do that step. So actually let's do that step now. So let's create another file here, and let's call this one main.js. Okay. Let me get rid of that for some, there we go. Okay. So now I've created another file called main.js, all right? And in here, right, I would now not do a link, I'd do a script. Because I actually could, and that's the other thing, is you could write, and this is important because you will see it, you could see CSS written inline, right in line, but typically it's all done in an external file. Okay, so this is an external CSS style sheet. Well, I say that as I start to do the JavaScript, because we have something similar with JavaScript, right? Is I could write JavaScript right in here, right? I could write script that would, actually I could do it right here. This is console.log, and then hello from Java. JS is the way we, JavaScript is abbreviated as JS, okay? Now in this case, it's not looking at my main.js file because I'm writing it inline, but I want to show it to you. Okay, as I come back to my page, if you don't already have it, have console open here. I think there's different ways here. You could choose console. And then hello from JS, but this would be hello from JS in inside HTML. Okay, which is, again, not typically how we would write it, but it is, you could see it there. Typically, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this. I'm going to come over to the main. I'm going to paste it in here. And now I'm going to come back to the index. And in here, I'm going to put this back as one line because I want to. And I'm going to say source equal, okay, main. And again, tab if I don't want to type the whole thing. So this is the more common way we do things, is we have, because there's so much that happen in these different files, we need to have them externally, you know, set up, external JavaScript files, external CSS files, because if we were to load it all into here, it would be even more things to look through and try to find things. but it just is more in that way, in that case, manageable. So let's come back over here. And now, right, let's change this to say hello from external JS file. Okay. And if you got that working, now this is also a way to test to see if you wrote the code for the script correctly. Because a very common thing, and don't do this, I've seen, is you do it like that. And it's like, no, it's source. So what this is saying, hey, what's the source file you want me to look for? So these two lines are doing something similar, but they're actually, in this case, right, they're elements that we're using are different. So we use a link to link our style sheet into our HTML, and we use script to say go find my external script file. But conceptually they're kind of doing similar things, but we name them differently. Okay, so that actually gives you an introduction to at least the most common things of structure. And what I want to do is actually in this video was something I talked about at the beginning that we haven't talked about yet, and it was one of the extensions. So I'm going to go back over to extensions, and here I want you to type prettier. Okay? So prettier is a code formatter, and there's a reason I'm talking about this now. And I want you to go ahead, and I already have it installed, but I want you to go ahead and enable it. Okay, and when you do that, again, you might have to get out of the editor and get back in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select everything in my index.html. Okay, Control A is away, or Apple A. And then I'm going to write, and by the way, notice all these dots, right? And notice it's creating kind of an outline, but not really. It's kind of a bad outline because it doesn't really show too much structure, and prettier is a way that we can make our documents look, yes, you heard it, prettier. Okay, so now right click, come down to, and there's a couple options here when you right click, and again, by having everything selected, you right click, format document with, and when I click that, it gives me options, and I select prettier. And when I do that, I want you, and you'll see this on your side, notice what it does to the document. It changes from those dots, which by the way, those dots were spaces, to tabs. Now I only could see the tabs when I had the item selected, and I can just tell you there's a whole discussion between people who say use tabs or use spaces. As a matter of fact, there's a really funny what's Sheldon? Sheldon from Big Bang Theory had a date with a young woman, and they got into it, or maybe it was Leonard. It might have been Leonard. Or Sheldon, one of them, and he couldn't see the girl anymore because they had big fights about spaces versus tabs. But more than anything, I want you to seek, because the one thing you'll hear me say is I want you to have good code, clean code. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and do a commit here. So your commit for this one will be commit, do your git workflow, and your commit message will be CSS, JavaScript, right? CSS JavaScript files will be a fine for this one. Okay, so this one will be 4, and then you can go ahead and commit. So now what we'll do is we'll come back now in week 4, and we'll start building out more of this now that we have this structure in place. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, the last thing I would have you do is one more thing in your file here, right? You already had that, right? How much of this did you know? How much of this did you know? Okay, give me your answer there, and then you can do one more commit. You can make that last commit whatever you want, and then go ahead and give me your history. All right, I'll see you in the next one.